Tonight we're heading deep into the swamps, shores, and shadows of Florida, a land of sunshine by day and sheer terror by night. From ghostly apparitions stalking empty highways to twisted tales buried beneath palm trees in paradise, get ready for 10 of the most disturbing true Florida horror stories that will haunt your dreams. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror hiding beneath Florida's beauty is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting darker, and the horror is about to begin. Now let's dive into the darkness. Glades County, Florida was the kind of place where the air itself seemed to rot. You didn't just sweat there, you soaked in it, like your skin was slowly being claimed by the swamp. The smell of algae and decay lingered even in people's clothes. Everything was damp. Everything felt like it had teeth. You couldn't drive 10 minutes without passing black water choked with reeds, cypress trees hunched over the banks like old men with secrets, or gators sunning themselves on rotting logs. And if you asked anyone in Glades County about the Gator Man, they wouldn't laugh. They wouldn't smile. Most wouldn't answer at all, but a few might whisper something like, "He walks on 2 legs when the moon is full," and then change the subject quick, like they were afraid of being overheard. Rex Bowman was one of the last real swamp trappers, a leathery-skinned old man who made a living catching gators, snakes, and raccoons and selling the hides to backdoor dealers who didn't care about licenses. He didn't own a phone, didn't have electricity. He had a shack deep in the Glades, about 20 miles from anything you could call a road, and everyone who knew him said Rex had eyes like a bird, sharp and always moving. He'd lived in the swamp his whole life, and people figured he'd probably die there too. He just didn't seem to belong anywhere else. Then one day he disappeared. No one noticed for a couple of weeks. It wasn't like he kept a calendar, but after a month, someone found his canoe floating near Blackwater Slough, tangled in some reeds. Inside were Rex's gear, a lantern, a busted trap, and a revolver with 3 bullets missing. There was blood smeared along the inside lip of the canoe, big brown-red streaks that had soaked into the wood. Sheriff Darnell called it a gator attack and moved on. But some of the old-timers said that didn't add up. Rex had handled gators bigger than Volkswagens. He'd once caught a 10-footer with nothing but a rope and a rusty hook. He wouldn't have gone down easy. And besides, why were there footprints near the water that looked like a man's, but with long curved claw marks where the toes should be? Months passed. Then 4 teens from Moorhaven decided to film a YouTube video about Florida's real-life swamp monster. They were seniors. Tyler was the loud one, always performing for the camera. Joe, the quiet girl who handled the editing and sound. Sam, the nervous one with thick glasses and a drone he loved more than most people. Carlos, the comic relief, always with a joint in his pocket and a dumb grin on his face. They wanted views. Something spooky, something viral. So they loaded up an airboat with cameras, snacks, and a tent, and set off into the swamp looking for Rex Bowman's abandoned shack. It took them almost 4 hours to find it. They followed coordinates pulled from an old online hunting forum, coordinates someone claimed led to the Trapper's Den. The shack looked like it had grown out of the mud. Half the porch had collapsed and the roof sagged in the middle like it was tired of standing. Dead raccoon skulls hung from the rafters. Inside, the place smelled like mildew, tobacco, and something coppery and old, like meat left in the sun too long. That's when they found the notebooks. There were 6 of them, water-warped, leather-bound, with Rex's name burned into the cover. The early entries were normal, trap logs, weather notes, feeding schedules. But by notebook 4, things had changed. The handwriting got shaky, sentences ran off the page. Some entries were just drawings, clawed feet, slitted eyes, something that looked half man, half lizard. One entry read, "It's not a gator. It's not a man, it's both. It stands when the moon's out, it whispers when you're alone. Another. It took the dog last night. No noise, just a splash. I found prints by the fire, too long to be human. It's learning, watching. The last page of the final notebook had just one line, written over and over like a chant. It walks on two legs when the moon is full. Carlos laughed it off. Old Rex lost his damn mind out here. But Joe didn't laugh. Neither did Sam. And that night, something started watching them. It began with the silence. The swamp is never quiet. It buzzes, croaks, clicks, hums. But around 2 a.m., everything just stopped. Like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. Even the wind died. Tyler stepped out of the tent and immediately called the others over. "Listen," he whispered. "You hear that?" "No," Joe said. "That's the problem." Then came the breathing. It was low and heavy, like something massive was inhaling right behind the tree line. Wet, too, like mucus bubbling in a throat. Sam turned on the thermal camera, thinking it was a gator or maybe a bear, but what he saw made him drop the thing. There was something in the trees. Tall, upright, broad shoulders, long arms. The heat signature glowed yellow, with patches of red where the chest was exposed. It had a long snout, a head that looked somewhere between reptile and human. And it was moving, slowly, deliberately, toward them. They ran. Carlos tripped and went down screaming. Joe and Sam turned back, but Tyler kept running. The flashlight bounced wildly as they scrambled toward the airboat. Behind them came a splash followed by another slow inhale, then a screech that didn't sound like anything born on Earth. It was high-pitched but wet, full of pain and something worse, glee. Tyler and Sam made it back to town the next morning. Mud-covered, pale, shaking. Carlos and Joe never came back. A search team found their campsite wrecked. The notebook pages were shredded. A single claw mark was carved into the roof of the shack, deep enough to split the wood. And then the footage started disappearing. The hard drives wouldn't mount. The SD cards were corrupted. Every clip they'd recorded either glitched out or vanished altogether. Except for one, Carlos's phone video. It showed him hiding behind a log, breathing hard. The camera pointed toward the trees. Two glowing eyes. A shadow stepping forward. Then Carlos whispering, "It's smiling." That clip deleted itself the next day. Now Tyler doesn't speak to anyone. His parents say he draws the same thing over and over. A creature with long arms, yellow eyes, and a snout full of teeth. Sam moved out of state and won't answer messages. He told one friend in a panic, "It's not a monster. It's older than that, the swamp made it. Or maybe it was always there." Hunters claim they still see something out in the glades. Something tall, covered in scales, walking upright along the shorelines under the moonlight. It leaves prints, too big to be human. Some folks say Rex Bowman didn't die, he became it. That the swamp took him, changed him. Others say that the Gator Man isn't a man at all. It's the swamp itself walking. And if you ever hear breathing in the dark, don't look toward it, because if it's smiling, it's already too late. They say the Devil's Den got its name because of the steam that rises from the spring on cool mornings, like the breath of hell escaping from the earth itself. But the locals in Williston, the ones whose grandparents and great-grandparents lived and died in the shadow of that limestone sinkhole, know the name came from something older, something buried, something that still dreams beneath the water, waiting for voices to drift down and wake it. Carly and James were just married, two happy, beautiful people whose biggest sin was believing that love could protect them from anything. They had that glow that newlyweds have, like nothing bad could ever touch them. Carly had a laugh like church bells in summer. James, a firefighter from Ocala, was broad-shouldered and endlessly patient. They picked Devil's Den for their honeymoon because it looked surreal in the brochures. Clear turquoise water glowing under a dome of rock, prehistoric ferns hanging like chandeliers, the kind of place you'd think the world forgot but Instagram remembered. They booked a scuba package. Carly had just gotten certified. James had been diving for years. They checked in, got the safety briefing, suited up, and descended through the narrow stone steps into the cavern. The surface was like a mirror, disturbed only by the occasional ripple or the plop of a stray droplet. Their voices echoed off the limestone, bouncing back warped and empty. The water was cold, colder than they expected. Too cold for Florida in early spring, but the cave was beautiful, ethereal. Shafts of sunlight pierced through holes in the ceiling like godlight. Beneath the surface, fish darted through submerged stone tunnels, and ancient rock formations curved like ribs around the cave's heart. The dive was going fine, until Carly saw something strange embedded in the wall. It looked like a bone, long, thin, almost human. She pointed it out to James, but when he swam over, it was gone. Or maybe not gone, maybe just buried deeper than they could see. Carly felt a tremor in her chest then, like the water itself had shifted, and for just a moment her vision blurred, the edges of everything swimming sideways, as if the world had tilted under her. She surfaced, ripping off her mask. Her breathing came too fast, too sharp, panic for no reason. James followed, concerned. She told him it was nothing, just nerves. The cave felt wrong, she said. James tried to calm her, but Carly's eyes kept darting back toward the water. They went back to their cabin, a cozy little rental tucked away under a thick veil of moss and cypress. That night, Carly had the first dream. She was underwater, not swimming, sinking, arms wrapped around her ankles, pulling her down. The deeper she fell, the darker everything became, until even her screams turned to bubbles. She saw faces in the silt, blank, bloated, eyeless. And then something huge moved below her, coiled like a serpent and crowned in bones. She woke up choking. Not metaphorically, she was spitting up actual water. James rushed her to the bathroom, confused, panicked. Carly swore she hadn't swallowed anything. Her lungs burned like she'd nearly drowned. The next day, she didn't want to go back to the den, but James convinced her. "Just one more dive," he said. "We'll film it. Make it memorable." Carly agreed, hesitantly. The sun was brighter that morning. The water looked calmer. The guides didn't mention anything strange, but beneath the surface everything felt off. The water was murkier. Visibility had dropped to just a few feet. They descended, following the path they took the day before, but this time the cave seemed different, deeper somehow, with new tunnels that hadn't been there before. Carly turned and saw James shining his flashlight into a narrow crevice. Something was moving just beyond the beam, a flicker of white, a shape that twisted too slowly, like it didn't care if it was seen. Carly reached for James, but her hand never made it. The cave floor gave way under her, and suddenly she was falling again, down, deeper than the dive map ever showed. Her light flickered. The water grew black and thick like oil, and then she saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Human, but not. Their mouths hung open in a silent scream. Their skin was gray and sagging, bloated from centuries of submersion. Civil War uniforms clung to some of them. Buttons rusted, insignia still faintly visible. She realized with a shiver that they weren't floating. They were standing in a circle, around something massive. A shape half buried in the silt. Not a man, not a beast. Something in between. Its body pulsed like a sleeping heart. Its head was crowned in old broken bones, some animal, some human. As Carly watched, its chest expanded and she heard a sound, not with her ears but inside her skull. A voice made of rusted chains and drowning screams. It spoke one word: closer. She woke up on the surface again, gasping. James was there holding her, shouting. The guides were helping pull her to shore. They said they found her floating, unconscious, nowhere near the mapped diving route. That night, James went missing. He went out to get a flashlight and never came back. They found his body the next day. What was left of it? He'd drowned in a shallow pool less than 4 feet deep. But his lungs were full of silt, packed solid, and his fingernails were torn clean off like he'd tried to claw his way out of the earth. Carly doesn't speak much anymore. She lives in a care home now, staring out the window, her hair always wet, no matter how many times the nurses dry it. Sometimes she mumbles to herself about the den, about the dreaming thing beneath the water, about the way it breathes when no one's watching. Locals don't dive there much anymore. They say the cave's been shifting, that tunnels appear and vanish. One diver swears he saw candles lit on the cave floor, flickering blue under the water. Another claims he saw a Civil War soldier float past him, eyes wide, lips mouthing something lost to time. But if you ever visit Williston, and you're tempted to dive the Devil's Den, don't stay too long underwater. Don't go off the mapped trail. And if you hear a voice in your head whispering your name, don't answer, because some things that drown down there don't stay dead. They dream, and they remember you. They say that I-75 through the Everglades, Alligator Alley, is the loneliest stretch of road in Florida. 2 lanes of blacktop slicing through nothing but swamp and moonlight, where the air always smells like rot and heat, and the darkness settles on your windshield like something alive. Truckers call it the Dead Mile for more than one reason. Tires blow out, engines quit, men vanish. But I never paid much attention to trucker tales. That is, until the night I hit mile marker 13. It was a Tuesday just past midnight, and I was hauling a half-empty load of citrus from Naples to Fort Lauderdale. Not my usual route. Dispatch said it was a last-minute fill-in. Easy miles, double pay. I didn't ask questions. I should have. The first thing that struck me as odd was the fog. It came down all at once like a curtain. 1 second I was watching the red pulse of my dash lights bounce off palmetto trees. The next I could barely see 2 feet past the hood. My radio went dead. No static, just silence, like someone had shut the world off. And then I saw it. A toll booth. Not one of the big concrete ones with overhead signs and digital lanes. This was old. Real old. A single red and white striped arm stretching across the road like a barrier to hell. The booth itself looked like it hadn't been touched since the 50s. Green painted metal, rust curling up the corners, a small window smudged with fingerprints and years. The light above it blinked. Stop. I knew there weren't any tolls on that stretch. Hell, I'd driven this route years ago, never saw one. But there it was, right in front of me, and that arm wasn't going up unless I stopped, so I did. I rolled down my window. The night was silent, so silent it rang in my ears. No bugs, no frogs, just the low hum of my rig and the sound of my own pulse ticking like a metronome. A man appeared behind the glass, not suddenly. He'd been there, I just hadn't noticed. Thin as a broomstick, face like dried leather, he wore a faded blue uniform, name tag scuffed beyond reading. A tiny cap perched on his bald head like something out of a cartoon. "Good evening," he said, his voice bone dry. "That'll be the toll." I reached for my wallet, half laughing. Didn't know they started charging out here. He didn't laugh back. "That'll be the toll," he repeated, voice flat now. "But we don't take cash." I paused. "What do you take?" He leaned forward. That face. Christ, I'll never forget that face. His eyes weren't eyes. They were holes. Deep ones. The kind you could fall into if you stared too long. "We take what's owed," he said. Something stirred in my chest then. A tightness, like a memory trying to crawl back up my throat. I tried to brush it off. "I don't owe anything," I said. He smiled, thin and cracked. "Everyone owes something." I should have driven off, should have backed up, floored it, crashed through the damn arm. But I didn't. I handed him something. I don't remember reaching for it, but I did. I gave him an old picture, creased and yellowed. It was my daughter, Lila, 5 years old, hair in pigtails, wearing the blue dress she loved so much. Thing is, I hadn't seen that photo in over 20 years. I lost it after the funeral. My fingers trembled. "Where did this come from?" He didn't answer, just took it, slid it into a drawer, and hit a button. The arm lifted. "Drive safe," he said. I peeled out of there so fast my tires screamed. The fog lifted 10 minutes later. Radio came back on, tuned to a preacher ranting about the end times. The stars looked wrong, like they'd been rearranged. But I got to Fort Lauderdale, dropped off the load, didn't say a word. Thought maybe it was a hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep. Until the next night when I started seeing her. Lila. At first it was just flashes. A reflection in a puddle. A giggle in the dark. I started hearing her voice through the CB. "Daddy," she'd whisper soft and sad. "You left me." And I had. Not by choice, but by grief. After the accident, I'd packed her things away, boxed up every memory, buried them deep. Couldn't look at her face, couldn't smell her blanket. It hurt too much. But now, she was back. Every night she gets closer, standing by the side of the road, sitting in the cab's passenger seat, her little legs swinging off the edge, wet, muddy, eyes too wide, smile too wrong. She doesn't speak anymore, just watches. Sometimes I feel her cold fingers brush my neck while I drive. I haven't slept in days. I can't eat, I can't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But the man at the booth did. He said we all owe something, and I paid with the one piece of my soul I hadn't buried. Now she's come to collect the rest. They say there's no toll booth at mile marker 13, that I-75 runs clean through. But drive it after midnight when the air goes still and the swamp breathes in deep, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see a blinking red light and a rusted green booth waiting for you. If you do, turn around, because whatever you give them at that booth, you never get it back, and some debts never stop collecting. Most haunted houses don't advertise themselves as such. They show up in listings with soft lighting and charming adjectives. Historic, cozy, quaint southern gem. The Whistling House of Apalachicola was no different. 2 stories, whitewashed wood warped just right by the Gulf humidity. A wraparound porch with chipped paint that suggested age, not decay, and a pair of rocking chairs out front that always seemed to be moving, even when the air was still. Jonathan Reed booked it for the month of October. He was a novelist, or at least he had been, once. One good book, a few interviews, and a decade of silence since. The kind of man who chewed his nails and drank in quiet gulps like he didn't want the bottle to hear him. His agent told him to get out of the city, find fresh inspiration. So he rented the house in Apalachicola, Florida, a place whose only claim to fame was oysters and being forgotten by time. He arrived on a Thursday. The house was cold despite the heat outside. Not air conditioning cold, old cold. The kind that clings to your bones and doesn't let go, even when you step into the sun. There were 4 bedrooms upstairs, all furnished with antique beds that looked like they hadn't been touched since the 1800s. The walls were lined with yellowing floral wallpaper, curling at the seams. But the thing that caught his eye was the plaque in the front hallway. It read, "The Weathersby House, Estuaries 1859, once home to Collars Silas Weathersby and his family. Locally known for its music, he didn't think much of it. Every old house had some kind of tragic Civil War backstory. Plantation, owners, ghost wives, dead kids. It was all the same Southern Gothic soup. Jonathan wasn't there for ghosts. He was there to write." The first night passed without incident. The second night, he heard the whistling. It came at 3:33 a.m. sharp, a soft, slow melody, like a lullaby, drifting down the hallway from nowhere in particular. It wasn't the wind. There was no breeze. He checked every window, every vent. Nothing. By morning, he convinced himself it was the house settling. Or maybe he'd dreamed it. A trick of the subconscious, fed by too many horror paperbacks and too little sleep. On the third night, the whistling came again. Same time, same tune. But this time it was closer, not just in volume, closer to him. It seemed to drift from the walls, from the corners of his room. and this time it ended with a whisper. "Johnny." He turned every light on, walked through the house with a flashlight and a kitchen knife like a suburban ghost hunter. Nothing. No one. Just that cold silence afterward, like the house was waiting. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he called the host. "Oh, the house does that sometimes," the woman on the line said. Her voice was flat, like someone who'd repeated the same line to too many guests. "It's the age. The wood shifts. It whistles." "Wood doesn't whisper names," Jonathan snapped. There was a pause. Then, "You should leave." She hung up before he could ask what she meant. That night, Jonathan did not sleep. He drank instead. 3 fingers of scotch. No ice. He sat in the study, flipping through the guest book out of boredom. Most entries were mundane. Families praising. The porch swing. Couples raving about the seafood. But a few stuck out. Didn't sleep. Someone kept humming outside the bedroom door. Woke up at 3:30 every night to whistling. My son said the man in the wall was singing again. Jonathan slammed the book shut. At 3:33 a.m., it returned. This time the melody was louder, clearer. It wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was in the room, at the foot of his bed. A slow, whistled tune that twisted itself into something, like a lullaby and a threat all at once. "Johnny, Johnny boy." The voice was a woman's, sweet, southern, and dead. Jonathan bolted upright. She was there, only for a second, just a blur. A woman in a long black dress, soaked and dripping, eyes white as limestone. Her mouth never moved, but he knew the voice had come from her, and she looked exactly like his mother. He left the next morning, packed up before the sun rose, drove 4 hours east and booked a chain motel with buzzing lights and no history. But he didn't escape. The whistling followed him. Now, every night at exactly 3:33, no matter where he sleeps, he hears it again. That soft tune, the one she used to hum to him before she died, the one she whistled while standing on the porch in Tallahassee, right before she hung herself with his father's belt. He hadn't heard it in 30 years, and now it came every night. Closer each time. They say the whistling house was built on old ground, that the Weathersby children died in their beds from fever and their mother refused to leave, drowned herself in the garden well. They say the walls remember, that the house only calls to certain people. Jonathan didn't believe in ghosts before Apalachicola, but now he doesn't write. He doesn't speak much either. He just listens, because he knows one night the whistling will stop, and the door will open, and his mother will walk in, smiling. They say the church used to sing. Long before the storm came in 1935, swallowing most of Islamorada and half of Key Largo, there was a white-clapboard chapel tucked deep in the mangroves. Locals called it the Church of the Healing Waters. No steeple. No stained glass, just wood warped by salt and sermons delivered in a voice like thunder. The pastor's name was Elijah Reams, and he didn't preach from the Bible, not really. He read from something bound in green leather, soft as skin, pages that shimmered wet under the lantern light. The faithful said his touch cured tumors and pulled pain from the bones. They also said the sick were never seen again. Almost 100 people worshipped there before the storm. Only 3 walked out after. The land was swallowed. The walls, the altar, the pews, all sank into the swamp. Official records said it was a natural disaster. A hurricane that struck on Labor Day, one of the worst in Florida's history. But some folks still whisper that the storm wasn't natural, that something came up with it, something old, with eyes like wet glass and breath that smelled of brine and rot, something they still feed. Miles Henley was 47 and broke, a journalist, turned ghost hunter turned YouTube burnout. 2 ex-wives, 1 ulcer, and a camera crew that quit mid-series because he wouldn't stop drinking on set. He had a reputation for chasing Florida folklore, especially the stories that no one else would touch. So when he got an anonymous email titled, "The Crocodile God Still Lives," with a set of GPS coordinates and a grainy photo of a submerged steeple, He rented a Jeep and drove straight to Key Largo. He figured it was a scam. Maybe some meth-cooked swamp people playing a prank. But something about the picture got under his skin. The steeple in the photo wasn't made of wood. It looked like it had grown, like bone. He found the trailhead after dusk. No signs. Just an old path choked with mangroves and the wet sound of frogs screaming in the dark. He walked in alone, headlamp on, camera rolling. He expected ruins. A few bricks, maybe the moldy remnants of a pew. What he found was a compound, hidden behind. A wall of palms and razor grass half sunk into the swamp was a village of wood and metal shacks surrounding the old church. Except it wasn't white anymore. It was green, every inch of it. The walls pulsated with algae. The cross at the top had long since rotted away, replaced by something that looked like a split jawbone. There were people inside. Not many. Maybe a dozen, mostly old, mostly quiet. They didn't speak to Miles, but they didn't stop him either. A woman in a sun hat offered him a cup of rainwater and touched his cheek with fingers like twigs. "The last sermon's coming," she whispered. "He's almost done dreaming." He should have left then. Instead, he stayed. He camped in one of the huts, filmed interviews, watched the locals gather in a circle every night, whispering to the black water beneath the floorboards of the church. On the third night, he saw them lower something through a hatch in the floor, something that screamed. And he dreamed of scales, teeth, a smile too wide for any man. He sent his final footage on the fourth day. It was shaky, wild. Miles, soaked in sweat, eyes wide and unblinking, standing outside the church with his shirt torn and one of his boots missing. "I was wrong," he said to the camera. "It's not a myth, it's a god, and it's hungry." Then he turned the camera toward the church. The doors were open. Inside, something massive shifted, a glisten of tail, of hide, of limbs too long and too jointed. The air shimmered with heat and rot. Miles dropped the camera. The footage ended there. No one has seen him since. A week later, a local fisherman found the camera floating near the edge of the Everglades. The footage went viral. Paranormal junkies and swamp tourists started showing up with flashlights and machetes. Most came back empty-handed. 3 didn't come back at all. And those that did spoke of songs, low reptilian chants that rose up from the water, voices that promised healing in exchange for flesh. They spoke of old skin, shed like paper nailed to trees, of a preacher's journal sealed in wax, full of prayers not written in English, of teeth, rows and rows of them, human and not, nailed to the altar in patterns like constellations. The Crocodile Church of Key Largo is still there. The locals won't talk about it. They pretend the mangroves swallowed the whole thing in '35. But if you drive south on US 1 and pull off just before the bridges, there's a trail that's not on any map. At the end of it, if you're quiet enough, you might hear the choir, practicing. You might see the green glow from the steeple. You might feel something move under your feet. Slow, ancient, waiting. Because Pastor Reams was right. Healing always comes at a cost, and some gods still demand blood in buckets. Coral Gables had always been too clean for its own good. Stucco homes in peach and cream. Bougainvillea crawling like fire across white archways. Royal palms, tall and straight as soldiers, lining the wide avenues like they'd been planted by God himself. Dr. Walter Langley had lived on Miramar Way since 1987, in a house he built with grant money from the University of Miami and his late wife's inheritance. He had taught botany for 40 years, studied plant pathology, and written 3 books about Florida's native species. He was a scientist, not a storyteller. He didn't believe in the unknowable, at least not until the trees began to cry. It started on a Tuesday morning in early August. Langley had just finished his coffee and was out inspecting the palms as he did every week, clipboard in hand. The city had spent a fortune bringing in these Caribbean royal palms from Cuba and South America in the '60s, big, beautiful bastards. some nearly 70 feet tall with trunks smooth as marble. He spotted the first one at the corner of his property. There was a crack in the bark, just above the root flare, oozing a thick, dark red substance. It clung to the trunk in slow, syrupy trails, and the smell stopped him dead. Iron, salt, copper. It smelled like blood. Langley, ever the scientist, assumed it was a bacterial infection. Red ring rot maybe, or a bleeding canker from Pseudomonas. He collected samples and brought them inside, prepped slides, swabbed Petri dishes. But under the microscope, there were no bacterial colonies, no fungal networks, just cellular tissue suspended in what, chemically, was blood. Human blood. He laughed, the first time he said it aloud. By Friday, 5 more palms on the block were weeping. And on Saturday, Richard Klein, Langley's neighbor across the street, vanished. His Prius was still in the driveway, lawn freshly cut, front door locked from the inside. But Richard was gone. No note, no signs of struggle. His dog, a terrier, named Winston, was found under the porch, trembling and slick with something red that wasn't his. That night, Langley dreamed of a fire in the soil. He stood in the middle of Miramar Way, barefoot, the asphalt hot under his feet. The palms bled from their trunks, their fronds rustling not from wind but breath. In the dream, something old and eyeless pulsed beneath the ground, tethered to the roots. And it was hungry. Langley woke drenched in sweat. His house smelled like rust. He called the city, spoke to code enforcement. They sent a contractor with a chainsaw and a clipboard. The man, Hernandez, made it 2 trees down before the blade seized, and the tree screamed. Not snapped, not cracked, screamed. Hernandez dropped the chainsaw and ran. The city left the trees, alone after that. More neighbors disappeared. Mrs. Adler, 2 doors down, went out to walk her cat and never came back. Her screen door was still swinging when Langley found it. Her cat was curled on the stoop, licking red sap from its paws. The next night, Langley dug. He remembered a story from his wife's father, a Seminole elder, about cursed land and burial, trees, places where something had been chained once, long ago, under the roots of palm and pine to keep it asleep. The land remembers, the old man had said, drunk on rum and memory, and it punishes those who pave over the bones. Langley went out with a spade, started at the first bleeding palm, digging until sweat stung his eyes and his arms ached. 3 feet down, he struck something, not stone, not wood, bone. A curved fragment, darkened with age and soil. Then another, and another. A full rib cage, bent unnaturally, like it had been coiled in pain. The skeleton wasn't human. The skull was too long, the jaw too wide. It had no eyes. He should have run. Instead, he dug deeper. By dawn, Langley had unearthed a pit of bones, hundreds of them, some wrapped in strips of Seminole cloth, others charred as if burned in sacrifice. At the center was a totem, rotted and black with age, etched with symbols he couldn't read but somehow understood. This was a prison, not a grave, and the trees were the chains. The palms weren't bleeding. They were weakening, dying. The roots rotted by something that wanted out. He tried to warn the others, knocked on doors, yelled on the street, but no one listened to the crazy old man screaming about spirits and cursed trees. Not in Coral Gables, where everything is perfect and nothing bad ever happens, except people kept vanishing, and the trees kept crying. One night he returned home to find red footprints on his hardwood floor. They led from the back door to his study, where his research had been torn apart, pages scattered like leaves. On his desk, a single palm frond lay flat, slick with blood. It was shaped like a hand. Langley barricaded his doors, lined his windows with salt and ash, just like his father-in-law taught him. He slept with the lights on and a revolver under his pillow, but still they came. They came when the wind stopped, when the frogs went silent, when the night pressed too hard against the windows and the air smelled like rust. The trees didn't just bleed anymore. They moved. Not fast, not much, but enough. You'd wake and find one closer than it was yesterday, a little to the left, a little taller. The roots lifted up through the sidewalk like fingers cracking out of a grave. And then the houses began to disappear. Whole blocks swallowed in darkness. Streetlights shattered, yards grew wild, and Langley, now the last man left on Miramar Way, knew what had to be done. He returned to the pit, poured gas down the hole, lit the match. The fire roared up like a mouth screaming open, and he saw it. Just for a moment. A face, or the memory, of one rising from the roots, twisted in agony and rage. It hated the light, hated him, and it would not forgive. The explosion tore half the street apart. Fire engines came. The news called it a gas main rupture. But the palms stopped bleeding. The disappearances stopped. Langley vanished too. His house, untouched by fire, was found empty. No sign of forced entry, just a single palm frond on the bed. Still wet, still warm. The city replanted the trees. Coral Gables must always look perfect. But every now and then, just after rain, the palms drip red again. And sometimes at night the earth breathes. It rolled in with the fog, no fanfare, no warnings. Just a heavy mist that swallowed the streetlights on 34th Avenue and turned the moon to a sickly smear in the sky. It was a Friday night when it started, the kind of night where the summer heat clings to your skin like a bad memory, and the air smells like rain without ever quite delivering it. The kind of night when people are restless and kids linger outside too late. Tom Delaney didn't notice at first. He was too busy with the daily grind of life, the long hours at the mechanic's shop, the bills that never seemed to get paid, and the weight of the past settling on his shoulders like a rock. His daughter, Lily, had gone missing a week earlier. She was 10 years old, bright-eyed, curious, always asking questions about things no one else seemed to care about. But then she vanished, slipping into the thick St. Petersburg fog like it had swallowed her whole. The police said it was probably a runaway situation, that she'd run off with friends, that she'd be back soon. But Tom knew his daughter. She wouldn't just leave, not without a word, not without a trace. So he searched. He walked the streets, knocked on doors, even tried calling the names of strangers, hoping one of them had seen her. His world had narrowed to that search, to the hollow ache in his chest that refused to go away. But that night, when he left his shop to walk home, the fog was thicker than ever. It crept out of the water like something alive, reaching its cold fingers into every corner of the city. And then, when he turned down the street where the old fairgrounds used to sit, nothing. No lights, no rides, no people. Just the faded memories of a carnival long abandoned. He was about to turn away when something caught his eye. The Ferris wheel. It was turning, slow and steady, the huge wheel creaking under the weight of years, though it had been closed down for as long as Tom could remember. The carnival had shut down years ago after a fatal accident on the Tilt-A-Whirl. They'd said it was unsafe, that the rides would never run again. But there it was. Tom blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the fog. But no, the Ferris wheel was moving. The lights along the track of the roller coaster flickered on and off in time with the motion. He heard it then, the sound of distant laughter. It was hollow, echoing almost like the wind, but not. He approached. The gates, rusted and unyielding for so many years, were wide open now, and the sign above the entrance, a faded banner that read Shadow Carnival, now open, swayed. With the wind, its letters warped and distorted as if the fog had seeped into the very ink itself. He hesitated. Something in his gut told him to turn around. Go home, forget the carnival, forget everything, but then he heard it again. Laughter. Not from the rides, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. A place inside the carnival that he couldn't see. His heart skipped, and in that instant, he remembered something. Lily had always wanted to visit the carnival. It had been closed when she was younger, She'd begged Tom to take her when it reopened. That was when he knew. He had to go in. The lights of the carnival flickered, and shadows danced at the edge of his vision. He pushed forward, past the gates, and into the fog that seemed to swallow him whole. The sound of footsteps on the gravel was muffled by the mist, and his breath came in shallow gasps as he walked deeper into the grounds. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the low, rhythmic hum of an old calliope organ. It played a tune Tom almost recognized but couldn't quite place. The midway was deserted, the stands empty. But there was something else now, something crawling just below the surface. The air tasted wrong. It tasted like metal and smoke. And then he saw them, kids. They were walking along the old path between the bumper cars and the funhouse, their backs to him. Their movements were slow, almost dreamlike, and Tom couldn't make out their faces. It was as if the fog had obscured them, hiding their features behind a veil. He called out to them, his voice cracking in the thick silence. "Lily?" The children didn't respond. He ran toward them, his pulse pounding in his ears. But as he reached the midway, the ground beneath his feet gave way to a strange sensation. The carnival had changed. It had shifted. The old stands now towered above him, warped by angles that shouldn't have been possible, bending like the warped wood of an old house. The Ferris wheel seemed to loom over him now, larger and more menacing than before. The laughter came again. It was louder now. Closer. From the House of Mirrors. Tom approached, the glass reflecting his face in a dozen twisted ways. His hands trembled as he stepped inside, the fog swirling around him, obscuring his vision. The laughter was unbearable now, echoing from every direction, bouncing off the glass. And then he saw her. Lily. She was standing in the middle of the house, her eyes wide and glassy, staring at him through the mirrored reflections. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her face was pale, ghostly, her hair matted with the mist. "Lily!" Tom shouted, reaching for her, but his reflection didn't move. It was as if he was frozen in time, trapped in the glass. He took another step, and then another. But the mirrors shifted. His reflection didn't match. The reflection of Lily grew older, her face twisting into something monstrous, her mouth opening wide to scream, but no sound came. Behind him, in the reflection of one of the mirrors, something else moved, a figure. Tall, thin, draped in shadows. It had no face, just the outline of a head and long, jagged limbs. It was watching him, waiting. The mirror shattered, and the shadows reached out. Tom screamed, his voice caught in his throat as the hands, cold and slick, wrapped around his throat, pulling him toward the darkness. But his hands, his reflection, they couldn't move. He was trapped, trapped in the carnival, trapped in his sins, trapped in a place where the past came to collect. And the shadows whispered, "You should have left when you had the chance, Tom Delaney." The fog rolled in thicker, and the carnival was gone. The next morning, when the sun rose, there was no trace of the shadow carnival. No Ferris wheel, no bumper cars, no House of Mirrors, just fog, and one missing father. The clock on the nightstand flashed 2:07 a.m. Danny, restless and worn thin by another sleepless night, stared at the ceiling in his dimly lit room. The oppressive silence of the small town of Okeechobee pressed in on him like an invisible weight, the kind that felt as if it could crush him if he didn't move, didn't make any noise. It wasn't that he was afraid of the dark. He'd long since gotten used to the murky nights of Okeechobee. The town had a strange peace to it, an almost oppressive calm that hung over everything, an illusion of safety, a facade of silence. But still, the darkness had a way of creeping in, like something not quite right, something hidden just out of reach. Danny's mom always said it was just his mind playing tricks, that it was normal for teenagers to be afraid of the dark. But Danny knew it wasn't just the night that haunted him. It was something deeper, something older. The night his dad disappeared, leaving nothing but a pool of blood and a radio that wouldn't stop playing, was still too fresh in his memory. The authorities never found a body, never found anything that made sense. They just wrote it off as an accident, some kind of freakish disappearance. The radio, though, had played that same song over and over. The same one that Danny had heard every night since, from the moment the clock struck 2 a.m. But tonight, something was different. He'd been flipping through the dial, hoping to find something to distract him, something to take his mind off the nightmares. He'd already tried the usual stations, some country, some old rock, a bit of talk radio. The clock had ticked past 2, and now the deep rhythmic hum of the night seemed to thicken around him. He settled on 103.1, the station he always went, to when the insomnia hit, when the silence got to be too much. The static hissed and crackled through the speakers, and then the voice came. Welcome, listeners, to another night of Ghost Radio. Tonight's playlist is brought to you by the spirits who wander through the dark. Danny froze. His heart skipped a beat. The voice on the other end wasn't familiar. It was a low, gravelly tone, far too somber for any radio DJ. It sounded like it came from far away, as though it had been traveling through time to reach him. Ghost radio? He whispered to himself, wondering if he had stumbled across some obscure late-night broadcast. He was sure he'd never heard of it before, but it wasn't the name that unsettled him. It was the tone. There was something off about the whole thing. He cranked up the volume, the static suddenly punctuated by a haunting melody. A song he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt nostalgic. He could almost picture a dimly lit room, smoke swirling around, shadows dancing on the walls. And yet the song felt hollow, as though it had been pulled from a time that never really existed. It ended abruptly, followed by a brief silence. Then a voice, weak and trembling, cut through the static, cutting deep into the silence. Help me, please. Danny's skin prickled. He wasn't sure if it was the late hour playing tricks on him, or if it was something else, something darker. The voice, though faint, had been unmistakable, desperate. And then the DJ came back, as if nothing had happened, as if the interruption had been just another part of the broadcast. That was Hollow Dreams by Sarah Kane. Coming up next, we have a track from someone who never made it into the light. This is Fading Light by the Ghosts of Highway 71. Danny's blood ran cold. He'd never heard of either Sarah Kane or the Ghosts of Highway 71. The static hissed again, followed by the hauntingly beautiful tune of the new song. It sounded like something that had been plucked from a forgotten place, from a time when life was much simpler, before it had all turned dark. But as the song progressed, Danny's unease deepened. It was too familiar. The lyrics were almost too clear, too personal. They were about someone losing someone they loved, someone calling out for them in the night. The words were painful, yet comforting, as if they were made just for him. And then, between the chords, between the voices of the singers, something else bled through, a whisper. Danny, Danny, are you listening? Danny's breath caught in his throat. His heart thudded in his chest like a drumbeat. He turned the volume up as high as it would go, his hands trembling, his ears straining for any hint of clarity. The static began to grow louder, louder than it had been before, and in the thick of it there was another whisper. A name. His name. Danny. He didn't know how, but it felt like the air itself was suffocating him, as if the room was closing in. The song cut off suddenly. There was a long, unnerving pause, and then the DJ's voice came back, now completely distorted, like it was being dragged through some unseen hell. Danny Delacroix, your time is up. He jerked back, eyes wide, heart racing. His hands trembled as he fumbled for the radio dial, but it didn't matter. The station stayed locked at 103.1. The voice continued, now rasping, like something crawling through the airwaves with a hunger. You've been listening for too long, Danny. Now it's time for you to join us. The dead are waiting. The static pulsed, and then the voice of his father, distorted and cracked, filled the room. Danny, you should have left it alone. And then, just as quickly, the radio went silent. The room was still. The fog outside the window pressed against the glass like an unwanted guest. The only sound now was Danny's breathing, shallow and uneven. But the static wasn't gone. It was still there, faintly humming, like a presence in the background. Danny scrambled to shut off the radio. His hands were slick with sweat as he turned the dial, but the voice wouldn't leave. It lingered just behind the silence. "Help? Danny? Please." The next morning, the radio was dead. Static had taken over. No music, no voices, just the persistent crackle of something unresolved, something left undone. Danny knew then what had been trying to reach him. His father wasn't gone. His father was still out there, still waiting. And now, so was Danny. The house on Biscayne Bay was everything Alice and Jeff had ever wanted. A sprawling, single-story bungalow with white trim, a garden that bloomed year-round, and a view that stretched all the way to the water. It was quiet, peaceful, and the kind of place where families went to forget the world outside. And for the most part, that's exactly what they did. They had a perfect life. Alice, the stay-at-home mom, and Jeff, a successful architect, had everything they needed. They had a newborn baby, Emily, who was the apple of their eyes. Their world was idyllic, but it lacked one thing: a little help. When Alice's maternity leave ended, they needed someone to look after Emily during the day. They didn't want just any babysitter. They needed someone dependable, someone quiet, and someone who could handle a newborn. Alice posted an ad online and was soon contacted by a soft-spoken woman named Claire. Her message was simple: "I used to live in that house." It was an odd way to phrase it, but Claire's application was impeccable. References checked out, and she was calm, with an air of grace and reliability. She didn't smile much, but she didn't need to. She was perfect. From the very first day, Claire settled in as if she had lived in the house for years. She knew exactly how to rock Emily to sleep, how to calm her when she fussed, and how to prepare bottles with an efficiency that Alice appreciated. There was something soothing about Claire, like a breeze on a warm day. The couple had no complaints. But soon, things began to change in ways that didn't quite make sense. It started with Emily. The baby, once a sweet, easy sleeper, began sleepwalking. Alice would wake in the middle of the night to find Emily standing in the hallway, eyes wide open but unseeing. It wasn't that she was crying or distressed, it was something deeper, something unnatural. The baby would wander from room to room, her little feet padding softly across the wooden floors, her arms outstretched as though guided by some unseen force. The first time it happened, Alice thought it was a fluke, a product of the baby's still developing sleep patterns. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, Claire was there to guide Emily back to bed, her voice soothing and gentle, though her gaze was always a little too intense. "I used to live in this house," Claire would say in a tone that was both soft and detached, like she was lost in a memory of something long ago. Alice had asked her once, "When did you live here?" Claire had simply smiled, a thin smile, and replied, "I'm not sure, I just know I did." That should have been the first warning sign, but Alice let it go. Claire was good with Emily. That was all that mattered. But then came the photographs. One afternoon, Alice had picked up her camera to snap a picture of Emily playing in the nursery. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just a moment to capture, a smile on the baby's face as she batted at a mobile above her crib. But when Alice developed the film that evening, she noticed something in the corner of the picture that hadn't been there when she clicked the shutter. A shadow. A dark figure, half-formed, standing behind Emily in the nursery. It was too vague to make out at first, but when Alice adjusted the contrast, she saw it more clearly. A woman's figure with long dark hair and a gown that hung loosely from her shoulders. The shadow was almost transparent, but it was unmistakably there, right next to the crib. Alice's heart froze. It was Claire. She turned to Jeff, holding the photo in trembling hands. He looked at it, then looked back at her, and then down at the baby who was quietly sleeping in her crib as if nothing was wrong. He didn't say anything for a long time, but when he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "Alice, maybe it's just the lighting, the way the camera catches something in the shadows. Maybe it's not Claire." But Alice wasn't convinced. She knew what she had seen, and then it occurred to her she hadn't noticed the shadow in the room before. How could it be Claire if she wasn't even in the room when the photo was taken? The next day, Alice took more pictures. This time, she waited until Claire was downstairs in the kitchen, making herself some coffee. She snapped a few shots of the living room, of the hallway, and of the nursery just to test it. And there, in the corner of the nursery again, was the shadow. This time it was even clearer. The figure was standing near the window, staring out toward the bay. The silhouette of the woman was unmistakable. Alice's stomach churned. That night, after Jeff had gone to bed, Alice scoured the house. She searched every corner, every closet, every room. She found nothing, except for the attic. The attic had always been a place they never used. The previous owners had kept it locked, and Alice hadn't seen fit to disturb it. But tonight, her curiosity was too strong. She grabbed a flashlight, climbed the stairs, and opened the creaking door. The smell hit her first. Dust, stale air, and something else. Something ancient. The light from the flashlight swept across the room, illuminating boxes, old furniture, and forgotten belongings. But what caught her eye were the photographs. They were scattered across the floor, old black and white pictures, the edges curled with age. Alice picked one up and her breath caught in her throat. It was a picture of a woman, Claire but younger, standing in front of the same house. She was wearing the same dark dress, the same solemn expression on her face. In the background, the house was a little different, older, more dilapidated, but the same structure. The date scrawled on the back of the photo was 1912. Alice's heart pounded in her chest. She turned over the next photograph and froze. It was a photograph of the house, burned, destroyed, with only the foundation remaining. But there, standing among the ruins, was Claire again. This time, her eyes were wide open, unblinking, her mouth a twisted silent scream. Alice gasped, stumbling backward as she felt something cold brush her arm. The flashlight flickered, and then the shadow appeared again. The figure of the woman, Claire, stood in the corner of the attic, just out of the beam of light. Alice dropped the flashlight. The room plunged into darkness, and then she heard the whisper. "You shouldn't have found this, I didn't want you to know." The voice was Claire's, but it wasn't. Alice's blood ran cold as she realized Claire had never lived in this house. She had lived in it. She had lived in it long before, in another life, when the house was new, and its secrets were buried beneath the weight of time. The baby had been sleepwalking for a reason. The shadow that followed her, the photos that captured Claire when she wasn't even there, all of it pointed to something old, something powerful. Claire wasn't the babysitter. She was something far older and far more dangerous. She was the house's ghost, and now Alice and Jeff were trapped inside just like those before them. The sun hung low over the Florida Keys as the ferry departed Key West, a thin line of orange burning into the blue of the sea. Dr. Nathaniel Griggs, a marine biologist who had been to almost every corner of the world, stood at the railing of the boat, watching the spray whip against the hull. The dry Tortugas lay ahead, a chain of islands as remote as they were beautiful, and it was here that Nathaniel would spend the next 6 months studying coral populations, algae blooms, and underwater ecosystems that had been largely untouched by human hands. It was a dream job, a chance to escape the pressures of academia, the incessant demands of colleagues, and the quiet, growing guilt he felt over a failed marriage. His ex-wife had left him months before, and the emptiness of their shared apartment had become unbearable. The job at the Dry Tortuga station had seemed like the perfect solution, a clean slate. But even as he leaned against the railing, breathing in the salty air, Nathaniel felt the first stirrings of unease. The ferry's captain, a burly man with salt and pepper hair and a permanently squinting eye, had warned him to expect a quiet ride. "Don't go wandering around much after dark, Doc. We don't run a late ferry to the island, and it gets strange after the sun sets." Nathaniel had nodded, half listening, half absorbed in the growing sense of isolation that was already gnawing at him. The island was known for its uninhabited nature. A research station and a small crew were all that remained of the once proud Fort Jefferson. which had been built in the mid-1800s and abandoned years later. Now it was a haven for birdwatchers, scientists, and the occasional lost tourist who was lured in by its haunting beauty. As the ferry neared the island, Nathaniel could see the crumbling stone walls of the fort rising from the horizon, its silhouette jagged against the setting sun. There was something eerie about it, the way the dark ruins seemed to pulse with a kind of quiet, unspoken menace. He told himself it was the isolation, the age of the structure. But even as he tried to dismiss the feeling, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The ferry docked at a pier that looked as if it had been built hastily, with boards that groaned and creaked in the wake of the boat. Nathaniel disembarked with his equipment, stepping onto the island for the first time. The dry Tortugas had its own air, a stillness that swallowed sound. There was no chirping of insects, no rustle of trees, just the wind whispering through the cracks in the fort's walls and the constant, distant rhythm of the sea. The island felt alive, breathing, watching, but not in a way that inspired awe. More in a way that suggested something far older and more dangerous than any human could fathom. The station was small, a single building surrounded by a low fence, with a satellite dish perched atop it like some strange antenna for an alien intelligence. Nathaniel was greeted by the station's manager, a woman named Beth, who seemed as detached from the world as the island itself. She gave him a quick tour, showed him the lab, the tiny mess hall, and the few other crew members who were there on rotation. "Not many people stay for long," Beth said, her eyes shadowed. "Most of the work is done underwater, and the isolation, it gets to some people. The island has its own rhythm, and it doesn't like being disturbed." Nathaniel, despite his growing unease, reassured himself. He was here for science. He was here to study the coral reefs, the fish populations, and to gather data that could help preserve what remained of the ecosystem. But as the sun set that night and the crew disappeared back to their quarters, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the ruins of the fort. The ferry had left as the sky turned dark, its lights fading into the distance until the island was completely isolated. The wind had picked up, a sudden gust that rattled the windows of the research station. Nathaniel sat in the small lab, reviewing his notes and preparing for the dive he would make the next day. He'd heard the island was full of strange underwater caves, tunnels that had been carved into the coral by years of water erosion, places where the marine life thrived in secrecy. It would be a perfect place to collect samples, to chart undiscovered species. He didn't know how long he had been working, but when he looked up it was dark, and the air felt heavier. There was a sound from outside, a faint scraping like something being dragged across the ground. Nathaniel hesitated, then stood up and walked to the window, peering out into the darkness. His eyes adjusted slowly and he saw nothing at first, but as his gaze wandered toward the distant silhouette of Fort Jefferson, he noticed something unusual. The fort's walls seemed to shift, as if they were moving, breathing with an unnatural rhythm. A chill ran down his spine. "Just the wind," he muttered to himself. "It's an old structure. The walls shift, the stone cracks." But then the wind stopped, completely, and with it came a sound. A low, grinding noise, like stone, scraping against stone. Nathaniel's breath hitched. He stared at the ruins, his heart thudding in his chest. It was as if something inside the fort was moving, something that shouldn't be able to move. "Get a grip," he told himself, but his hand trembled as he reached for the door. The beach outside was quiet, save for the gentle sound of the waves, but Nathaniel's footsteps felt strangely loud against the sand as he walked toward the fort. The moon hung high in the sky now, casting long, pale shadows across the island. The ruins of the fort loomed ahead, its stone walls covered in creeping vines and moss. As he approached, he could feel the temperature drop, the air growing thick with a strange, damp heaviness. The door to the fort was ajar. The hinges creaked as Nathaniel pushed it open. Inside, the air was musty, heavy with the scent of decay. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that was not quite natural, as if they were alive, breathing. His flashlight flickered as he stepped forward, casting eerie shadows across the rooms that stretched out before him. He moved deeper into the fort, his footsteps echoing off the stone. The sound of his own breath was too loud in the oppressive silence, and his mind began to race. This was all wrong. This was not a normal island. There was something hidden here, something ancient that was waiting. Then, from the darkness ahead, he heard it. A voice. Not a human voice, but something deeper, more guttural. A whispering sound, as if the walls themselves were speaking. It was low, like a chant, like a prayer. He froze. Something was down there, waiting for him, watching him. The air seemed to thicken around him, suffocating. His heart hammered in his chest, and his breath quickened. He turned to run, but as he reached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. The walls shifted again, and this time Nathaniel felt it. Something large and heavy was moving, crawling toward him from the depths of the fort. The island wasn't uninhabited. It was hiding, and it was about to claim him.